They Came with the Storm, Part 2. Stephanie ran behind the counter screaming as a few guests attempted to escape out of the back door. The men seized them before they could get too far. The man on the left continued watching Lucas and Arya, studying them before releasing his tongue once more. Lucas grabbed his butcher's knife and swung it hard, slicing through the long tongue as it reached for Arya, removing about 8 inches, 20.32 centimeters, of it. The man remained silent, but winced in pain as he snatched the remaining tongue back into his mouth. Blood poured from his pale lips down his chin as the piece of barbed tongue flickered around on the checkerboard floor. Blood oozed from it as it moved rapidly by Arya's feet, causing her to jump and scream in terror. Thunder sounded loudly as the injured man moved swiftly towards Lucas, Arya, and Stephanie with his hands out. Blood continued to drip from his mouth as his nails grew before their eyes. They were pale and sharp at the tip. Lucas yelled out, holding the knife as Arya turned quickly, grabbing the pot of hot grits from the burner that sat beside the grill. Without hesitation, she slung the hot grits into the man's face as he approached them. He quickly grabbed his face with his hands as his skin bubbled and blistered, yet he did not scream or make a sound. The other two looked on, frowning in anger as Lucas, Arya, and Stephanie made a run for it out the back door. They headed through the back hallway swiftly, jumping over the drained corpses of fallen patrons. 2 tongues shot out in sync, narrowly missing them as they pushed through the door into the pouring rain. Lucas took the lead, still holding the knife in his hand as he headed for his dark blue Honda Civic. He always parked in the back near the large trash can. They ran cautiously, sneaking glances behind them. Lucas desperately searched his pocket and retrieved his key fob. He unlocked all of the doors and didn't waste time jumping into the driver's seat, dropping the knife on the car's floor as the 3 men exited the diner. The one with burns on his face seemed to be healing quickly as his pale skin regained its original appearance rapidly. Grits stained his suit along with drying blood, but the rain was quickly washing that away. Both Arya and Stephanie ran around to the passenger's side, with Arya reaching it first and jumping in as Stephanie begrudgingly jumped into the back seat behind her. They watched the men with heavy breaths through the rain as Lucas started the car in nervous haste. The men opened their mouths as their tongues shot forward. Arya and Stephanie yelled out as Lucas hit the gas. He swung a hard right, turning the car as one of the tongues hit the passenger side mirror, knocking it off. He sped around Kippy's diner as Arya and Stephanie held on tightly. He drove maniacally around the building and out of the parking lot, swinging his car onto the road sideways before straightening it and pressing down on the gas pedal. "Call the sheriff," Lucas yelled. Stephanie nervously fumbled with her cell as she dialed the sheriff's department. She placed the speakerphone on, and they all listened in desperate anticipation as the phone rang. Eventually, the automated answering service picked up with no human response. Stephanie hung up and dialed again as Lucas fearfully looked through the rearview mirror, hoping that the men weren't somehow following them. Arya found herself quivering as she mentally recounted what she had just witnessed and what they had just experienced. How was this even happening? She thought to herself. The automated answering service picked up again, and Stephanie hung up the phone in frustration. We'll just go there. If those men or whatever they are have attacked others, then they're probably all tied up, Lucas said, attempting to comfort the girls while battling his own anxiety and fear that had reached critical levels. He held his steering wheel tightly, turning his knuckles white and his palms red. Stephanie, finally processing Marlene's death and the chaos that had unfolded at the diner, began to weep loudly, covering her face with trembling hands. Tears also fell from Arya's eyes as she stared at Lucas. "I'm scared," Arya said softly. "Everything is okay. We'll be okay once we reach the sheriff's department. Sheriff Green and his deputies will protect us," Lucas said, holding back tears as his heart drummed rapidly. Arya nodded her head as she swiped away fallen tears and rainwater that dampened her face. The rain continued to pour heavily, filling the car with the sound of tiny drums and the sweeping of the windshield wipers. Stephanie continued to weep quietly as she watched the rain run down the back windows like small waterfalls. The streets seemed eerily empty, though some cars were parked at various businesses as they drove by. The town of Alton was small compared to some, but it didn't lack the basic necessities. It was charming, historic, and located by a main highway, making it a popular stop among traveling tourists. Seeing the streets so empty was jarring, but Lucas remained silent as he sped towards the sheriff's station. Arya let out a sigh of relief as they approached the light brown brick building that contained a large golden star and Alton Sheriff Station written boldly and largely above the entrance. An American flag blew rapidly in the wind on a long off-white pole next to the parking lot that Lucas pulled into swiftly. A few more cars sat in the parking lot along with Sheriff Green's patrol car. Lucas, Arya, and Stephanie all looked around cautiously before exiting. They ran quickly through the rain under the covering over the entrance. The rain was heavy, nearly soaking them completely from the short distance between the parking lot and entrance. Lucas swung open the door, and they all ran inside, taking small breaths of relief. The cool air conditioning was a shock to their bodies as it instantly chilled their wet skin as they walked through the station. Everything was silent except for the distant sound of weeping. There wasn't the usual sound of loud talking or computer keys clacking. Assistant Jenna couldn't be heard taking local calls. Lucas's stomach dropped as he moved warily forward, with Arya and Stephanie trailing closely behind him. They all stopped abruptly as they entered the main area. "Oh my God!" Stephanie exclaimed, trembling violently. Arya gasped as Lucas walked forward slowly. Bodies were everywhere. Everyone was dead. Sheriff Green, Deputy Cass, Deputy Trent, and Deputy Carver all lay on the ground, eyes open, dilated. Their skin was pale and blue. Bruised, deep cuts surrounded their swollen necks. Lucas, Arya, and Stephanie walked through the station in shock, unable to process the scene before them. A brunette woman lay face down at her desk. Arya touched her shoulder, and her body fell backward and then sideways. She was deceased as well. Her name tag read Jenna McAllister. Arya jumped back, bumping into Lucas, who began to cry. Stephanie stood in shock, shaking her head no over and over. The weeping sound continued from the back. Lucas, Arya, and Stephanie followed the cries, walking around the bodies of others. The weeping grew louder as they drew nearer to the cells. Crouched in the corner by a corpse next to the cot inside the middle cell, sat a young scruffy-looking man, crying and rocking with his legs pulled tightly up to his chest. "Walter?" Lucas said softly. Walter stopped crying and turned around. His face was red and wet with tears. His gray eyes were bloodshot and dilated. His oily brown hair fell into his flushed face. Sweat stains had gathered around the neck of his filthy graphic white t-shirt. His jeans looked damp and dirty, and his shoes were missing. He looked at them with absolute fear, trembling before letting out an ear-piercing scream. Hey, since you're so far into the video, why not consider subscribing? We post content like this regularly. Also, consider giving a like since it helps people who like these find the videos. Now let's get back into the story. The next part is coming soon. Be with us. Thanks for watching.